LSU's coaching carousel in full spin, and that's where we'll begin today. There's obviously two spots in LSU staff that they're looking to fill. Offensively, you got to replace Joe Brady, and defensively, they've got to replace Dave Aranda, who was introduced at a press conference today at Baylor, by the way. Well, let's hear some of what Aranda had to say in Waco earlier this morning. But an unexpected spin of the carousel came over the weekend where Texas A&M pursued Cory Raymond. So this is the second time now that Jimbo Fisher, since he's been at A&M, has pursued an LSU assistant, at least the second time that we know of. Went after Dave Aranda a couple of years ago when he arrived in College Station. That was a much talked about pursuit, and ultimately Dave Aranda stayed in Baton Rouge and became the richest coordinator in college football at $2.5 million a year. This time, far less fanfare, but with Maurice Linguist, A&M's defensive backs coach, pursuing or leaving to go join Mike McCarthy's staff with the Cowboys, Texas A&M went after Cory Raymond. And this has happened before now, where Cory has been pursued and even sought opportunities. And I'll always say of anybody, anytime, you should always listen. Somebody, it doesn't matter what you do for a living professionally. If someone calls, you listen. You never know what they have to say. You have the conversation. If the people you work for aren't okay with you having that conversation, then they're not okay with your potential advancement, and that's a problem with people you work with or work for. So I'd always say, listen. Doesn't mean you take every job or any offer, but you always listen. A couple of years ago, Cory Raymond, when Bill Bush was added to the staff, my feeling is Cory probably took that as a slight. NFL came calling. He listened to the Miami Dolphins. Now, he didn't go, but I think that flirtation allowed Alabama to negative recruit LSU. Probably cost him Patrick Surtain, if we're being honest. But Cory rebuffed Texas A&M and decided to stay at LSU. This is all... And then Rivals was the first to report that LSU has offered Cory Raymond a new 3-year deal at $600,000 per year. He was making $435,000. So that is a significant jump. When you're going to make an extra $165K a year, that's year to year, that's a pretty substantial. That ain't Joe Brady going from $40,000 to $400,000 to $2 million or whatever he'll make in Carolina, but still significant. Here's the thing about Cory. Just finished his 8th season at LSU. Hard to believe, but he's been here since 2012. 8 seasons he just finished at LSU. And he's 50 years old. Cory is the president and CEO of DBU. Yes, guys like Corey Webster and Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu all preceded Cory Raymond's time in Baton Rouge. But the pipeline of talent that has continued for nearly a decade and built upon that legacy, that's Cory. And without him, you don't get all those players. Probably get some, not all. And I think that's, look, without Cory Raymond, you're not getting Derek Stingley. Without Cory Raymond, Jamal Adams, Tre'Davious White, first rounders like that, not likely. So his value to this program, to say it's significant is understated. That's underselling Cory Raymond. The question a lot of people have asked is, well, could Cory be a DC? Could he be promoted from within to LSU's defensive coordinator? Well, this contract extension and raise tells you that's not on the table. Because if it were, you wouldn't agree to an extension and a raise if your intention was to promote him to defensive coordinator. And there's two sides of this coin. Number one, could Cory Raymond be a defensive coordinator? Probably, sure. The reality is, though, he hasn't done it. And at 50 years old, and when you're Ed Orgeron and you're running a program that's coming off a national championship, can you take that risk? Now, Orgeron's built the equity now, having won a championship, to take whatever risk he wants. Bringing in Joe Brady was a risk. But the last time LSU did this and promoted from within, that defensive coordinator was 2008. Remember, Miles won the championship in 2007. They lose Bo Pelini to Nebraska. They promote from within with Doug Mallory and Bradley Dale Pivoto, the old Malvito experiment. An abject disaster. Both those guys got looked for new jobs after the season. Essentially fired without being fired. Staying ahead of the resume. And then Miles went on and got a proven DC in John Chavis, and that's been LSU's MO since. After Chavis, it was then Kevin Steele and then Dave Aranda and so on. So that's my assumption, is that that's what Ed Orgeron is going to do. He's going to find someone who has experience as a successful defensive coordinator instead of taking a risk and giving someone their first opportunity. For Corey specifically, at 50 and making $600,000 a year and coaching at your alma mater, like, could Cory Raymond find a defensive coordinator job somewhere? I'm sure he could. But if you have to step back to move forward, if you're Corey at age 50, and I'm spitballing here, do you want to take the DC job at Western Kentucky or Fresno State or Temple, or, a place like that, to have success and then advance to like a Power 5 DC? And the years it would take, and in the meantime, you'd probably be taking a pay cut as well. So sometimes, like, I'm not going to say Corey doesn't have that ambition. I don't know. I mean, speaking to people close to him, I'm sure he'd love the opportunity. But at the same time, he's in an odd spot in his career, just with his age and his experience, where I don't want to say he's stuck, because making $600,000 a year and coaching, being a position coach and a lauded guy at your alma mater and coaching for championships, and there's a lot to like about that gig and that life. But there's also a perceived ceiling there. So all I know is that if Cory Raymond sticks around at LSU, it's a major win for LSU, especially when he rebuffed an in-division foe to stay at LSU. A couple of other things. Was also reported that Mickey Joseph was offered a promotion to join Nebraska staff, his alma mater, as passing game coordinator and associate head coach. Turned it down. That's odd. And there had been a lot of talk or assumptions about possible staff members coming in, if it was Frank Wilson or whoever it may be. Obviously, Frank's now at McNeese, but one of the thoughts was maybe you position, if you had brought Frank in, Mickey's the guy recruiting New Orleans. If Frank did that, maybe do you have movement on staff? Don't know. But that's another interesting one. The question everybody's asking today are two things. One, what's the latest on DC? And two, what about the timing? The timing, I think, is easy. The timing, I think they'd like to have someone in place this week, because 2 weeks from Wednesday is National Signing Day, the traditional February signing day. And you'd like to have your staff in place in full for whenever the contact period opens up again, and you can start taking official visitors before National Signing Day, so you have your staff in place and ready to roll. Because LSU is looking at the possibility of inking a top 3 class, possibly, depending on how those final 6 spots are filled, possibly leapfrogging Bama and Clemson, having the best class in the country. I mean, it's possible based on how you fill it with these last 6 spots. So, I mean, last week you played on Monday. I mean, it's hard to believe it's been a week already. It was a week ago today when they beat Clemson. But you played on Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday, Orgeron was in Florida and in Houston accepting Coach of the Year honors. Then Thursday, they were off to D.C. Thursday and Friday in D.C. Back Friday, Saturday celebration. The staff had off Sunday, and they were back in the office today. So last week was a whirlwind. And now you got to sprint to fill these spots, do whatever interviews you're going to do, and get everybody in place for what's coming, which is finishing off this signing class, which is critically important for this team and the staff and the future of the program. So the timing is not a hard one. It's this week. The who is a little bit more of a question. Everybody's mentioned Chris Richard. We know the ties there. If you don't, he played at SC. He was a GA at SC, coached with Pete Carroll in Seattle. Most recently spent the last 2 years with the Cowboys. That staff just got fired, so he's available. There have been reports that maybe he could be hired on staff, on Clay Helton's staff at SC. That's a possibility. Clancy Pendergast is another name with SC ties, and Ed has hired a lot of guys with SC ties, with James Craig and Tommy Robinson. I mean, John Robinson on staff right now. If it were Pete Jenkins and Jerry Sullivan, Ed has hired people with whom he's familiar and comfortable. That's sort of been his trend, his hiring trend at LSU. Really the one time he went outside the box was with Matt Canada, and that blew up. I guess we could say that Joe Brady hire was an outside-the-box hire as well, but and that obviously worked. But more often what we've seen from Ed is hire familiar people close to him. So there are other names that people have mentioned. I've heard the Bo Pelini rumors, as a lot of people have, and I've heard the spectrum from that That's agent talk. There's nothing legitimate to, all the way to he's got an offer. I mean, I've heard the gamut. So Bo is the head coach at Youngstown State right now. That would be an interesting reunion. Mike Detillier last week mentioned Jeff Fisher as a name he would call, obviously who played at SC under John Robinson, two-time NFL head coach, been out of the game for a couple of years. That would be an intriguing name to jump back in. Some have mentioned Ron Roberts, which would make a lot of sense, but there's also a thought that he may join Dave Aranda in Waco at Baylor. So it's percolating, but my guess is Ed is going to be doing his due diligence here in the next few days till he locks down who that's going to be as his passing game coordinator and as his defensive coordinator. And the one thing I'll tell you about offensive staff with some of the conversations that I had this weekend, the options are on the offensive side are limitless to replace Joe Brady. The amount of cold calls that LSU has gotten with people interested in that job is significant. And Ed can almost handpick who he wants. And it makes a lot of sense, right? If Joe Brady can step in and coach that talent for 1 year, run spread concepts with that talent for 1 year, and parlay that from a $400,000 a year passing game coordinator job to a multi-million-dollar NFL coordinator job, it makes a lot of sense. So why that would be an in-demand spot. So we're going to keep our eye on it here over the next couple of days. My guess is before this week is over, LSU is going to have those spots filled. We'll be talking about it as we move through the week.